This video is a video for atheists and Christians, but it's mostly aimed at the atheists. I want to rehash an issue that I've discussed with a lot of atheists over the years on YouTube, and that being the problem of evil. And in sending recent replies, I'm actually sending this to one of the YouTubers that I'm currently discussing an email this matter with, to reiterate it and to make more clear the points that we're making on this subject. The problem of evil is not a problem for Christian theism. The problem of evil is not a problem for Christian theism. It is, however, a problem for atheists. Now let's look at that. How is it a problem for Christian theism? Or how is it not a problem for Christian theism? We understand the origins of evil. Christian theism does not claim that evil was a created thing by God himself. The creation of beings, which he is an all-powerful God, he can create beings, and he can create beings with self-will, with willpower, with decision-making abilities. He can make automatons, or he can make free-willed creatures, because he's not limited by his power, and that has nothing to do with his actions. Now, ultimately, he has created something that created evil, but that does not present a problem for God. He's sovereign. You can't tell God, you're God, but you can't. That's the definition of God. There are no limits to what you get to do. The only thing you can't do is be illogical. So God created the angels, and in creating his archangel that guarded the throne room of God, that performed for him, that entertained him, that protected his throne, that angel saw the fullness of the glory of God, and being so powerful, so beautiful, and being the top angel, thought that because of that, that he could then be like the Most High and could be God himself, and deluded himself and was tempted into a lie, and he believed his own lie that he could be God. And he turned against God and attempted to be God, and God threw him out of heaven, cast him down to the earth. Meanwhile, for possibly 125 years, Adam has been in the garden enjoying his free will as a human being with a spirit and a physical body, living in the garden with only one commandment. Have all the children you can have, eat of all the fruit of all the trees you can, but not this one. This is the man who sat there with God, and God created an animal and brought it to Adam, and Adam named it. So man was sitting there as God would bring these animals to him, and they would name it, and they discussed things, and they interacted, and they lived, and he had peace with God. And he, too, had the ability to think for himself. God did not make him an automaton. I always find it funny that atheists condemn God for giving them the free choice to reject God, when we know if they had no free choice, they'd still resent God for not giving them a choice. So God's caught in a catch-22. But God doesn't fall for that. God doesn't believe in atheists. But back to what I was explaining. So in Christian theism, we point out that Adam is in the garden with a free will. Here comes the spiritual entity, an angel, a messenger of God, who comes down, who has already attempted to dethrone God and got himself kicked out of heaven, comes down and says, well, let me mess with what God has created. I'll take his creation from him as well. So he comes down to the woman and says to the woman and the man the same thing that he himself, the first lie, that, well, listen, God doesn't want you to eat that tree because he knows if you eat that tree, you can be like God. You can be God. And man goes, wow, I can do anything I want to. So I'll eat of the fruit, and I'll be like God. And he ate of the fruit, and he died. Not instantly. He died spiritually. Because the main reason that the fruit of that tree was forbidden was the knowledge that you could reject God and try to be your own God without God, totally autonomous, totally sovereign without God, was deadly. That is deadly knowledge that you can rebel against God. And the Bible states plainly, through one man, death and evil entered into the universe. Or entered into the earth. Not the universe. It was already in the universe because Satan was there. But into the earth entered death, and therefore evil. One man, a fallen man. And each of us, men and women born of their seed, inherit that corrupt nature where we've already fallen. We've already sinned against God, because now we know we can rebel and throw off the reign and leadership and ownership of God. So for us, evil's not at all a problem because that's not inconsistent with God's nature, that he gave us the wonderful gift of self autonomy, self sovereignty, that we can make our own decisions rationally, thoughtfully, or irrationally and emotionally at times. But we get to choose what we do. That's a gift of God. That's freedom. He gave us freedom. Now, as we find in the New Testament, when Paul says, hey, you're taking your freedom and using it for sin, you're turning your freedom into sin. So we know from human history that our freedom of choice can be used as a sin. This is not inconsistent or incompatible with the existence of God. He created beings that have free will. And again, whereas atheists can claim they have free will, but they can't necessarily prove it, we Christians can say that we do because we have a spirit that is not bound by biological determinism to this vessel that it resides in to do just what the genetics of this vessel will tell it has to do, or the biochemistry. I have a soul which allows me to think beyond the limits of this set bundle of neurons up here. Now, atheists can't make that claim, and that brings us to the problem. The real problem of evil is a problem for atheists, for atheism, because atheism can't even admit there's evil. Let me say that again. Atheism cannot admit there's evil in the world. Whatever is. If all we are is determined biologically, if we come out of it, all these social constructs, all the claim of social Darwinianism, and all this other nonsense is an utter nonsense. You will do what you're biologically predetermined to do or what you're socially conditioned to do. Doesn't matter which, doesn't matter how. There is no evil. What is. There is no God. There is no higher standard. Everything is arbitrary. You can keep building up that, oh, well, our society says killing is evil. Well, the Mayans, I mean, the Aztec society said killing was good. They killed them, pulled the hearts right out of the person right on the thing and offered it to their false gods, and it was good. So you can't condemn the actions of the Aztecs or the actions of Hitler if there is no God. A society cannot judge the actions of another society because the societies in your social Darwinism become the measure of arbitrary right and wrong, and that changes over time through different peoples. So you have a real problem in atheists because you have no objective standard of right and wrong. Not that there isn't one out. Folks, you cannot misunderstand the difference in the real and the logical position of your logical philosophical worldview. That is, atheism is not defining how things are. It's attempting to describe how things are, but we have how things really are. So just because there is real evil, that's a damning bit of evidence against atheism. Everybody knows there's real evil, and children can tell you it's wrong and that there are different things that are right and wrong. Every child, every person has an innate sense of right and wrong. That's damning evidence against atheism because atheism says there is no God. Well, if there is no God above all men at all times that created everything and that the universe is answerable to him and to his moral code, then there is no permanent, transcendent moral code or standard by which to measure the deeds of men throughout the history of mankind. So every man, as the Bible said of them in that day, every man did as he saw was right in his own eyes. And that's what you have in atheism. Whatever is. There can be no better because there is no worse. What is. You can't say, well, we have to move toward a better society because what is better? What is. There's no getting better. We want to improve our society so we have these moral codes that lift up. No, there's no better or worse. What is. If people murder, if they beat old women up with baseball bats and torture them and pull their fingernails out with pliers, or if they help the old lady across the road, it doesn't matter in atheism because there is no God. Both self-actualizations are equally valid. Whether I beat the old lady or help her across the road, I've not done anything wrong. There is no wrong. I get to choose for myself because there is no God. There's no one I have to answer to. And the atheists will often answer, well, might makes right. They'll give you an appeal to power. Well, society says, and if you don't, they'll put you in prison or they'll kill you. And I say to that, that's nonsense. That's a fallacy. It's an appeal to power. Ad baculum. But even if it weren't that, I can say this. You can bring 10,000 men here, and if I want to be evil, I can slaughter as many people as I want and practice it out there. If I happen to have the chance random birth in an area that will allow me to just rape and pillage and burn like the Mongol lords of Genghis Khan. Who is there to stop me? I am the law. I can create it through power. The same will to power that Nietzsche spoke of. That if I have the ability to get people to follow me, and I can build up power, I can create the law. I can be the law, and I can do what I want at will, and I will set what the moral standard is. And we see that in some cultures where they reward evil, the Spartan culture, the culture of Genghis Khan, and these other cultures where, and the culture of Muhammad, where killing and stealing are acceptable, that is the spoils of war. And warfare is rewarded and applauded, and you get bounty, and you get booty, and you get, to take slaves in the Greek Empire from whomever you conquer. So for atheism, this is a real big problem, because they don't have any anchor for any kind of morality. And if you come and tell me, well, society will punish you if you don't, that doesn't apply. You're talking and debating out of the wrong orifice, because we are just because you're in a civilized culture right now, that doesn't mean that all of culture is civilized. Go to Mogadishu, go to Somalia right now with the warlords and the coked up or doped up guys taking dope, and with AK-47s and AK-74s, and you tell them how things are going to be and what's right and what's wrong. In a culture that rewards the violence, that rewards the bloodshed because it's all dog eat dog, go tell them that they have to act more friendly because it will benefit their culture. They will introduce you to lead shot and gunpowder and the will to power. So for Christians, we don't have a problem with evil. The problem of evil is only a problem for atheism, because atheists can't say there's evil. And I always ask them, well, what's evil? What's evil? And it's a very hard question, because they have to prove something's evil, and that they cannot prove with any logical necessity. So what you have is Christian theism. The only hope is to attack Christian theism, and we've already explained that that is not a problem, because we said that God gave us free will. We chose to take that freedom and to create evil. The one thing man helped create, along with Satan's help, was death and evil. In our one creative act in the garden, we created evil and death. And because of that, we have suffered, and we know that all suffering originated from that point. Now, we're not saying that along that one of Adam's descendants might not have sinned and created evil himself. But in this case, Adam, the best man that ever was, fullness of perfect DNA given to him, sinned. And in God's wrath against him, because he did not want him to continue in sin forever, he was created, remember, for those of you that don't know, Adam and Eve were created to live forever in a physical, carnal existence, forever. All the children they want to have, all the children their children's children want to have. The sin in the garden was not sex. So they were created to live forever, and God had to curse them. Why does God cut you off when you sin? God cuts you off because he says, even of the sinners, there has to be a stopping point. I don't want you to keep on. It's like Dante might have had a little good point that there might be levels of hell, but God cuts off even the most wicked people so that their wickedness has a limit that he can then punish, and that it's not allowed to continue on to a point that would be even worse in their punishment in hell, or in the lake of fire, not hell. Hell shall, another side discussion. Let's stick to the point. The point is that God cursed man so that he would not continue in his rebellious, dead spiritual nature for eternity. So he cursed man and said, okay, now you've found out you've died spiritually, and I'm going to show you physical death so you can understand it. That's where they throw slavery at me, and I keep saying, wait a minute, God did not endorse slavery, but he did tolerate it. And why did he tolerate it? The same reason he tolerates hate is because if there is no hate, there is no love. There are certain things that we can only understand and experience in dichotomies, in the dipoles, in the existence of alternatives. If everything in the universe was white, then we would not have perception of colors. If it was only absence of white and white light, we could not appreciate colors. We wouldn't know what blue is. God would look at us and say, what about blue? Or you look at your friend and say, what about green? And he'd say, what do you mean? There's only white. There is only light. There wouldn't even be colors. You wouldn't even say white. It's that, and there's lightness and dark. That's it. So the offering of alternatives, the giving of free choices, that is how we know things. So God allowed slavery to occur so that he could show physically what spiritual slavery is, which is slavery to sin. I'm free to do whatever I want to. You sinners, you atheists, are not free. You can't stop sinning. You're addicted to it. You can't stop. You keep doing it like a rat in a maze, in a hamster in a wheel, running and running and running, and it's never fulfilling. It's never satiating. And you do it again and again. And I don't, because I'm free of it. I do what I want to do. I freely choose to worship God. I freely choose to serve God. I freely choose to enjoy relationship with Him. You are damned to keep doing your sins over and over like a gerbil trapped in the wheel. So that is how I know what God was explaining slavery is. That's what sin is. So He allowed enslavement so people could understand the difference in freedom and slavery. If you lose your freedom for a while, then you can appreciate freedom. But if you've never not had freedom, you don't know what freedom is. So God allows the existence of evil and other things that were not caused directly by Him, and allowed it and tolerated it for the sake of your freedom, for the sake of you having a free will and the ability to choose. Now, atheists can't even prove that there is free will. That's another video. Watch my other video on that. But these are just some of the myriad of problems for atheism that are presented by evil. But Christian theism doesn't have those problems, because not only can we define and establish and have it in the Word of God that God did not create evil, He's not evil, and He does not promote evil. Paul said, even when I do evil, mercy abounds. When I sin, mercy abounds, because God is faithful to forgive me. So should I sin more, that grace should much more abound? He said, no. Don't abuse your freedom by sinning just so you can prove how merciful God is, that He'll forgive you. Stop sinning. Christians don't sin. So we have this point that we understand light because we have darkness. We understand hate because we have love, or love because we have hate. We understand life because we have death. These are things tolerated by God, but the Bible clearly establishes over and over that they were not created directly by God. They were corollaries of potential and possible actions of free will entities that God created and gave choices to. And to the atheists, I again say, if God had raped you and inhabited you and had spiritual fellowship with you against your will, would you, and never allowed you to sin, but gave you a perfect existence, would you then spit in His face and condemn Him for not giving you freedom? Since you do spit in His face and condemn Him for giving you a choice when you abuse the choice and go your own way. You're to blame for your situation, not God. You. We are all responsible for where we end up. I don't care if your parents raped you, tortured you, abused you as a child, abused you emotionally, mentally, physically, if the bullies beat you up at school, if you were raped by an uncle or an aunt or abused that way. You choose the way you live. It's your fault. It's not mine, and it's not God's. So that comes to be the fundamental issue a lot of times, but I hear atheists condemning God for giving them free will and choice. And it doesn't go both ways. You either have one or you have the other. And if you have free will and you have sin and you have evil and you have wrongdoing, you got to have a God. Because there is no logical foundation, absolutely no logical necessity, and no proof of evil and its existence if there is no God. What is. As Nietzsche said, if you're going to throw God off the bridge, don't pick His pockets. Don't say we want moral value judgments in here because it's good, so let's take that out of His vest coat pocket before we throw Him off the bridge. Now let's throw God off the bridge. He said, no, if there is no God, there is no God. If there is no God, there's no right and wrong, and we can live freely the way we want to. I think he's one of the most consistent atheists that ever lived. And he wasn't ashamed to tell the truth. He was honest about his atheism. And I think that's the way you need to be about your worldview. I'm honest about Christian theism. The good parts and the bad parts, because the bad part is there's hell to pay. And that's why we debate these issues, because it's so critical. But as far as the problem of evil, it doesn't present a logical contradiction for Christian theism. It only presents a major internal contradiction in atheism. Because how can you call anything evil if you have no transcendent, immutable, unchanging law above all men at all times throughout the existence of the universe? And that should be your responses. Don't deny this video. Tell me your transcendent moral code that existed above all men at all times throughout history. If you cannot answer that question with logical necessity and without a logical contradiction, then you know I'm right, and that's the way it is. You have to deal with that as an atheist. You can't condemn Hitler if you're an atheist. I can, and be consistent, because my God said that Hitler went against him, was succumbed by that Antichrist spirit, and sought to hurt God by slaughtering the children of God. I can say he's wrong, you can't. And if that bothers you, then I strongly suggest you get a worldview that works. If your worldview cannot describe the universe as it is without logical contradiction and internal contradiction, and it can't answer the big questions like who are we, where did we come from, why are we here, what is the meaning of life, what is the purpose, I suggest you get a new worldview, because your worldview stinks. It's insufficient. So until the next time, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'd like to hear from you, atheists. If you disagree with me, again, I know that you didn't watch this whole video. If your response is anything but answering this question, what is your anchor for your transcendent moral code that allows you to condemn my actions as evil if I sat there and murdered children? If you can't say that that my killing of a baby is wrong, then you have a problem, because we all know that killing babies is wrong. If you can't show me your transcendent moral code origin, you can't show me the cause of your transcendent moral code, or that you have a transcendent objective moral code, then you cannot condemn my actions. Therefore, you can't even explain that evil exists. So that is the question you have to answer to refute this video. You have to show me where you get your moral code from, and that it is objective and transcendent. If you can't answer that, then you have a problem in your worldview, and you and I both know that your worldview fails, because it cannot define or describe the universe as it actually is. It cannot explain it as it exists before us, because both you and I know that murder is wrong. Until the next time, let's hear those posts from you, and I'd love to hear debate. If not, I'd love to hear from those of you that have watched this video and feel that this is starting to wake you up about your atheist preconceived notions that don't work. So take care.